In this part of Soren Kierkegaard's life, we're going to follow him into the year 1845, where he becomes made fun of in a newspaper in Denmark because he's been hiding behind all these pseudonyms while he is writing his texts. And we're going to follow him in his book, the publishing of the 1846 writing, the finishing unscientific appendix, or after writing, as he's tried to talk about. And it's also a very exciting text that's really worth stopping up by, because he goes really into some issues that are very original when you see it from the different perspective of people living still up until today. So let's go back and see why he became laughed off. Well, after he published that famous book of his we talked about earlier, the stages on the road of life, where he ends up talking about these different persons talking about life, and then you get the ethical person and the letters stolen, and the many personalities he's using there, they become too many. And the same with his use of Quidam, that wise guy who gets also criticized and looked at by another guy, Fraticus there. And so there is a newspaper called the Kosar. And well, there's been a critic writing his yearly book about important issues in that year. And so he mentions this strange philosopher with the many names that's hiding behind his pseudonyms and writing too much and too ironically, and always mixes his own ethical and religious life into each thing he's writing. And we can almost be sure that they knew who it was they were talking about, but most of the people in the public were not really sure that it was him. And so maybe it was some kind of understanding between the cultural elite, that even though they knew these issues, maybe didn't put it forward, and maybe he was just teasing him. But well, they say that as we can see from Kierkegaard's notes on this, that he got really mad about it because he saw that this is a kind of polemic that was not really wise or clever. And so he writes back. He lets this Frater Taciturnos, the silent brother, answer back in the newspaper called Fedrelanet. And so this guy who is the critic, he gets really hanged out for lack of understanding and ability to look through this experiment he's going through and using. And so he say that, well, let me tell the reader that this guy is in contact with a very low-standing newspaper called the Kosar. And the Kosar was a Danish newspaper at that time that was really interested in satire and ironic comments on people, and it was seen as a non-respectable newspaper that made fun of everything and maybe was the place where people could like hang their stuff to dry. And so when he said that, he said, well, the only thing that's missing from this guy's critic is that he makes me an issue in that very low-standing paper. But by doing so, by attacking this this person, this critic, and the newspaper at the same time, well, they somehow like joined forces and in some way actually took his line up to be a reality. So the Kosar started actually mentioning him and also made satire drawings of him. So they started in December of 1845, and then in January 2nd, 1846, well, they talked about that wandering philosopher who is making thought experiments, and we wonder whether he would, this silent brother, Taciturnos, whether he will do something for the poor as an experiment in life and give a lot of, give like a golden coin. It was called Rigsbankdaler in the Danish golden coin. Well, why shouldn't he do that kind of experiment? So they're making fun of him, that he's not really practicing what he's saying, not living the real life. And they also made some caricature drawings of him. And the first one of the most famous that came out among people was they showed him with two different leg size, say leggings with two different sizes. So one leg was shorter than the other, and so they continued week after week, really giving him what they had of critique. And so he went to attack back in the week after, in 1846, still in January, in the same newspaper, the Federland. And so they wrote back against him and made the drawings even worse. And so he was depicted in several of these drawings. In one was he was riding a horse, the other riding his girl, sitting on her back, trying to tame her. And the third one where he's standing and maneuvering with all his different characters, not really, they're all made fun of. And then that he's very self-centered, because they show a picture where he is the center of the earth and everything is surrounding his own center and his own world. It's like saying this guy's too self-occupied. He's the center of the universe. There's nothing else like him, nobody else. He is the exception. And so they used satire and irony and back at him, because he had used it a lot in his own writings and his own critique all alongside everything he's been doing. And so he saw himself as misunderstood, as the real exception and the martyr of the common beings that was out after him, because he followed his own idea and his own life as something unique and special, and they didn't like that. So this was his interpretation of it. And so he said, even though I'm misunderstood, I'm guilty, and the guilty has to be judged. And this is a beautiful and deep sentence in many ways, because judged by who? Judged by the public, by the common sense of people, by those who want everything to look like each other. And so he saw his situation as a true suffering that was given by the God behind life, or the whatever is guiding what's happening. And so because things got so hot on him again, he went to Berlin in May of 1846, was there for a short term, and went back again, but then only to find that he was part of some comedy that was made by students, and they had a figure in it that resembled him a lot, and his name resembled him a lot. They called him Soren Kirkegaard. And so it was a continuous focus that stayed on him. He didn't like the humor, he didn't understand it, but he could see, well, this is the public side of people's way of making fun on behalf of others, because they cannot relate to themselves. So it's in many ways confirming his ideas in his books. And so he was like, in a way, becoming aware of what later was going to be called in the Danish literature or mentality, to be happy of the wrongdoing of others. If somebody is really not really making it, can make somebody else happy about that. Skadefryd, as they say in Danish. And so and nobody is above me, everybody is under me, and everybody should laugh at everyone, and no one should think anything special of himself. This mentality that's really deep also in the Scandinavian way of thinking, and has its roots very strong also in Denmark. Well, it's I guess more human than just Danish, but in that time this was what he really could see things were getting at. But the case was that he already had in that period had already published or sent to publishing that writing, last writing of him, with a very, very strange title. It's called Ending Unscientifically Appendix, or After Writing. With the long title, it's an after writing to the small philosophy, in a mimic, pathetic, dialectic, co-writing, existential idea of Johannes Climacus. But the big change in this was this time it was published by S. Kierkegaard. So he stood by the publishing, but not the writing. He gave it to Climacus, that guy who was seeking the heavens in his way of being. Well, he stayed still like playing on these pseudonyms, but now stepped forward as the one who is publishing this book. And it's a very strange title, and so I got some help from one of the authors of Soren Kirkegaard to understand how to read it and how to understand it. Really, it's not so easy to get, and my translation to English is very poor. I'm very sorry for that, but well, I'm not sure anybody's listening anyway, but it's okay if you're listening. I'm very sorry for that poor translation, but you get the point that it's a long and difficult title. Well, he published it in his name. Then we have this Johannes Climacus, who appeared in earlier text as the writer of this book, because he wanted to continue his research, this time into more depth of how to be living and how to be living with yourself. And when he say what can you say? It's a finishing, because he wanted to continue the idea that was laid forward in the Small Philosophy from June 1844, where he was talking about how faith can be understood as a way that's related to the self, the experience in it. And so he wanted to continue that writing. And when he say the mimic, pathetic, dialectic, well, it's also making fun of the time, but also maybe answering back all the jokes about him, but still holding on to what is mimicking. It's like he's just putting words in the mouths of different characters. So he's still wearing these many masks, talking in his books. And when he say pathetic, well, it's like, all right, this is not really the highest in his ideal quality. It's like kind of freedom to use these ideas he had. And then dialectic, it's like he's saying, well, this is going forward and backward. This is the double edge of things that are related in the same time. And unscientific is, in a way, the meaning to say this is not a scientific way of researching this as science was in his time, that objective clinical analyze in the nature sciences, where you go and observe something and make notes of it and then describe a system behind it. This is unscientific in that way. This is like it's a personal philosophical writing, and he insisted on that and trying to explain it in the beginning as well. And so we can see like a kind of stubbornness in this, and we can see also a kind of continuous effort. And the very like special thing is that all this laughing of him in the newspaper that actually made him also more famous at the same time. This is the double edge of that newspaper, because it was like kind of casting mud after him, but by doing so they are making him more on the tongue of the everyday persons, and thereby making him more publicly known, even though it's in a negative way. But that's how things can happen, especially in Denmark at that time, that, well, when you get laughed at, you also get popular. And if you can laugh at yourself, that means you will become like really a big figure in people's eyes, because you have the ability to go beyond that. And this is also something he's going to talk about. But well, his situation was like becoming more famous, being used in the public, people talking about him, not really understanding what he's writing. Well, you see how long it takes just to get through understanding some of what he's writing. And I wondered those people at that time, if they could really understand what he was doing and what he was at, the education level, and the people who were educated were maybe able to read. It wasn't the difficult language for them, because they were used to such kind of language, but they could maybe see the originality of it. And also at the same time, he was picking on some issues that people maybe didn't talk about or describe in such a great detail as he did. And this is also what gave him the sharp edge of the pen. He could be ironic, he could be humoristic, he could talk in sharp ways about things that people would realize was part of society or themselves or see around them. So at the same time as this was probably very much unlikely to be understood by everyone what he's writing, especially this strange title, it had very, very profound impact as ideas up until now. So what happens in this book is that he's in the time where he has trouble with two big philosophers or thinkers close to him. The one is German, Hegel, and the other one is Grundtvig, the Danish author and priest. And his trouble with these two is not personal, but about the ideas. Hegel is trying to use the spirit, the phenomena of spirit, as a guiding light for a system, like you can say a system of stars or a system of understanding how life develops. And he can see, well, this cannot be. You cannot put everything in a total system because you are an individual in all that, and individuals has their own special uniqueness that cannot be just understood by describing it in a system of going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and then developing to the end stage, something like that. So it was like putting everything in a kind of systematic order, and the spirit of the world, and how the public evolves. Hegel has been very influential to give ideas to later philosophers on how some things became clear to them, also to Soren Kirkegaard, as people who has studied this has been seeing through. And they will comment and say, well, his work on the phenomenology of the spirit has been a source of deep understanding for Soren Kierkegaard. He has, through that, seen what a spirit is, but now he wants to put it down on a subjective level and say this is the center of everything and not that system of building everything up. And so he criticized them very hard and saying, well, it's like somebody building a big colossus of a castle, but living in a barn just beside it. This is how he described him. And the second person he really wanted to get at was Niels Grundtvig, the big author and philosopher, whom I'm also going to talk about later, because he has this influence in the Danish society as the father of the Danish mentality today, Christian Danish mentality in many ways, still very influential, and has been a great figure in Denmark since then. Had also had his life story really unfolding in different stages and very interesting. But well, he was troubled by the fact that the criticism of Christianity has taken so much hold in people because of the Enlightenment age and because of the systematic view of historical text, made the New Testament, and not the least the Old Testament, look as if they were undocumented writings. It was like looking into a book that was full of holes and troublesome texts and repetition and many kind of contradictions and things that didn't really add up. Also in the writing style, it was like sometimes it was copy paste of different type of books. And so all this type of historical criticism of the writing in the Old and New Testament and the stories that didn't add up made the Bible criticism beginning its hold on people and going wide. And Grundtvig had to see what to do about this, because he was a very passionate Christian and saw the faith as the source of light and goodness. And so he could see this as something that he had to relate to. And the way he went about it, Grundtvig, was to say, well, I made a very unique discovery. I made a special and very interesting discovery that, well, it doesn't matter whether the text itself is true or not, or the Bible text is really factual or not. It might be as these people are saying, but what is really mattering is the things that the Christian group is bound by and gathering around. It's the spirit of the group that is keeping Christianity alive and keeping the faith between the communion of the Christian believers. And so it's like going to the altar, receiving the the bread and wine, and sharing that experience with the Savior that keeps the faith alive and keeps it going. So we have to find it in the church community. It is there the true spirit of Christianity is awakened and will keep staying alive. And Kierkegaard didn't like this idea because he was also a passionate believer. He was also a priest and theologian, but his specialty was like really looking at things from a subjective way as the human center of everything. He cannot just give himself up and give the people up to the group and to the church and to that community, and it didn't make sense in his mind. So he went attacking Grundtvig as well. And so after he do that in the book, he keeps circling back to confirm the idea that subjectivity is the reality, is the truth, is the fundamental way of getting to faith, and not all these systems that people would like to put up as the higher spirit will emerge, and people will see the system ended, and we are all part of a dialectical movement to some higher sphere of being, as Hegel would have been like explaining, or as we understand from what he's explaining. And so the same, he would say, well, subjectivity is also the basis for belief, even though if it doesn't make sense. It's not the idea, it's the personal compassion and the passionate way of going about your faith and jumping in it, leaping into it by grabbing yourself and going along, that makes you the deepest deep felt religious person that you have to be. It's not the objective truth out there, it's the subjective reality you are living that is the only reference that you really have. And in there you have to make that jump. You have to go with yourself all the way from being that aesthetic to get to the ethic, and from the ethic the religious, and from the religious take that leap of passion into the hands of God and the faith. And so in all that, whatever system is built out there does not really matter. This is his idea anyhow, and that has been a great debate and a great discussion as well, and problematic sometimes for people in Danish society, whether they are looking at life from a perspective of Kierkegaard or Grundtvig, if we are in Denmark and the places around it in Scandinavia. And so he goes about confirming this, still using Johannes Climacus as the voice for him, explaining that, well, identity is what you have to look into and to become who you are truly and stay with that. And he, of course, develops in this book now his idea on how to do that by getting to these stages once more, not really explaining them as he did in the first two times, but going back and trying to unfold the third level, the religious level, that he developed slowly. Because if you remember back to either or, he had been talking about ace papers and beast papers. And this is the aesthetic, the person living on sensuality, running away from himself. And he said this type, when he becomes a bit aware of how he's living, he will become ironic, because irony is a kind of distancing to yourself and to life in a negative way. You're making fun of it. You're distancing yourself from it on the behalf of yourself and others. And so when you are there, you have the possibility to jump to becoming that ethical person who takes his duty and responsibility very serious, and his guilt will be holding on to him if he breaks the rules and makes something out of order, because life needs to have that order in it. And in that person, when he is ready to make the jump to the religious stage, he will become the humorist. He will become the person who will make fun of things, but in a more positive way, because he can see his weaknesses. It's like a person just having the humor of a situation because he cannot do it. It's like in a circus where you can see a person standing on the line or a clown jumping around, and you do not laugh at him, but you're actually laughing at your own picture, your own self, or your weakness. This is an example I've added maybe to make it clear in my own mind here. But it's like between the three stages, there are like a middle stage where you are moving from being that sensual person on the surface and then becoming more and more aware of the irony of everything. It's and so you become making fun of it and fun of others and distancing yourself. And so when you go to the ethical stage, you become the humorist. And going to become the humorist is really a way of understanding and admitting that you have a weakness. You have not been able to move from the ethical stage, from that perfect, beautiful life on the surface, to really take your subjectivity seriously, to live it in a passionate way. You're just living, and you're living according to the order and law around you, but you're not really getting to the core of yourself. And so things becomes more humorous for that person because he can see his weakness in what's going around, and it's also kind of distancing, but in a positive way. And then the jump into the religious sphere has also two faces, and this is the new part in this book, where he is like saying, well, religious being is not just being religious. There is also this surface way of being religious, following the traditions and rituals and doing what's right and feeling guilty and feeling that fallen human who needs to be rescued, and doing everything like everybody else is trying to do in the religious area. Because when you enter that, you find a lot of other people who had reached that stage. And so from that type of religious, you go to another and deeper level of being religious, and that's where you grasp your passion, and every logic and every thing around you just changes. You become one with your deeper self in a way that you haven't experienced before, and you need the jump to do so. You need to go and give everything up, yourself, your understanding, your objectivity, your way of looking at things, to just give yourself in to that love and compassion and what can you say, the passion, as he's using in this. So this is basically the book that really is also profound and deep in its way of getting us to that stage, and is also very special because, well, how many have been writing like this in the same way? And so he wants to solve many problems at once. He wanna get us on. He wanna use the Socratic method. It's like he's viewing back at Socrates at the same time, seeing him going around talking to people in an ironic way. You know everything. I do not know a lot. Can you explain to me how this and that is fixed, and how is it to be a politician, and how is it when you do this and that? It's like turning people's ignorance against them by using himself in a kind of mimic or mask or act. And so in that way he's becoming ironic, and he's becoming like distancing himself and making fun of things in front of other people to make them look at themselves as the ignorant being they are. And some didn't like that, and he was criticized by that. And so, but at the same time, he's awakening people. And so it's like he's saying, well, what did happen after that? Well, people became more ethical, and some people would have been awakened to their duties or to their limits or who they really are, and then changing their pursuit of what they have been doing, like that politician he had been talking to in one of these issues, Socrates. He wants to be a big politician, but Socrates could see that this guy is very limited in his mind and understanding and way of being, and so he wanted to make him aware of that by asking him a lot of questions, and in the end, in a way, put him in a very delicate situation, because he felt small, and he felt like, oh my God, this guy has made fun of me or put me in a delicate situation. This is what happens when you go into the ethical stage and you start seeing the humor of your limitations and things that's not really as they should be. That duty to love is not so perfect. And from there, you become religious, and by doing so, you are still on that journey. You haven't finished. You're not at the end stage, because you have not reached the true identity that really is inside you to become that whole person he's been talking about. And to do so, you have to solve three issues in his understanding. One of these is your awareness of being guilty. That's the issue of guilty or not guilty. Do you get rid of being guilty on that stage? Can you overcome it? Can you live with it? Or would you still use sometimes the humor to distance yourself from it, or the irony against others to make it disappear? Can you make it disappear? Or will it change sometime and make you very heavy-minded and make you, as they say, guilt-ridden? You will become very heavy in your mind and thoughts, feeling very, very guilty of something you've been through in your life. And so this is the first issue you have to relate to when you are on that stage of the deepest level of religious being in a subjective way. Yet the personal life that is being religious on is not the same as that common religious practice that's spread among many people. This is what he's taking us into here. The second thing is the paradox about this God that you believe in. It's not rationally, objectively, in his eyes, very rational, and maybe there is a criticism of all that, but how can you align yourself with that paradox of a God, and especially in Christianity, and the critique of it has been very harsh at that time. So how can you align yourself with that God that doesn't seem to make sense in the time of science? And then how can this God be eternal in time and be time, part of a timing in the eternal? How can this, and he's talked about that in the previous book, well, how can you align these two things together? And so he's been talking about it in a small philosophy, where he is trying to relate to his Christian faith and how he can understand it. And so he gets back to these things, and now it's more clear in his mind that this is the three issues he has to resolve. But then he adds one more, saying, well, when you become that religious person, you have like a kind of duty to the next human, to share the love. And there is what he called the pain of sympathy, where he sees there is a troublesome relation between people who are religious on the surface, at least, trying to show that compassion to others, but they cannot do it because they are not of the same religion or background. And so they can be different. And when the others are not the same as you stop looking at that compassion in the same way as you will do with the people who are the same as you. But does that not contradict the deepest message of seeing the human as the human is, and granting the human that tolerance and understanding and care just because this person is human and given spirit and life by the God? This is a contradiction he's trying to relate to here that is very deep and beautiful, really beautiful. And so that pain of sympathy is when you realize that loving your next is something that is unconditioned, whether this next has the same God or not. It's not a kind of picking and choosing here. It is a kind of deep felt spiritual way of looking at life and people in it. And so he's relating to these things in that book in a very deep way that is difficult to get around, I must say. And I'm just been like trying to circle some of these ideas, and maybe well, yeah, I hope it somehow made sense, and it made sense in my mind anyhow, by reading it again and talking about it, and so I can see where he's taking us and how he's taking us on this journey of becoming those deeply subjective people. I still don't understand, though, how you can become that religious person living in a way of a passionate, what can you say, you live in that passion you have, whatever it is that is taking you, without having your objective mind with you. This is not easy, because we are mostly, especially in several places in the world, and as human beings, many times also bound by the idea of being critical and logic and using your mind so you do not fall in the blindness of life and getting cheated or manipulated by false groups or people or religions and so on. And so how can you combine giving that up to a kind of inner passion that you can have and living that kind of religious way? It seemed a bit like being part of mysticism he's getting at here, just living the experience of life and religion, and not really just adhering to the surface level of it. And I also like sometimes look at what he's writing as very much out of his experience, and can we make that as a common human experience, because do people in other places in the world really relate to this? And this is also interesting when other cultures are looking into his works, and has been for maybe half a decade or more. Well, are they really relating to the same issues in the same way as people like me from the Middle East, or like someone listening from the West? Is there the same experience all the way around in the world? This could be very interesting, because he's put us on that road to find that common special thing that is in every one of us. So that special unique side of us, the subjectivity, being ourselves closest and grasping ourselves, is the unique thing that is common. Isn't that beautiful? It's like saying, well, yeah, this is unique for everyone, but when it is unique for everyone, it is common for everyone as well, that everyone is unique. And so how do others in other cultures, I'm not speaking about collective cultures, but just as individuals, when they relate to this, how would they interpret that idea and that understanding? How does it fit in where they are living and in their lives, and how do they interpret the way to go about being this? Because sometimes I interpreted, well, things I say, yes, this correlates with what I have been experiencing, for sure. But at the same time, well, I think it is a kind of, I'm putting it in the frame of my own culture, an understanding of that culture that I belong to. If I'm a mystic, or believe in the spiritual mystical ways, or have experienced them, lived them, I would see this as an interpretation of that. And if I'm a dogmatic person, I would see it as being really truly faithful in my faith, having that passion and strong will to hold out and keep holding on to that orthodox way of thinking. Or if I'm a conservative, and so on and so on. And if I'm an atheist, or maybe a person who is not really on the line with these ideas about God and religious ways of being, and have left it altogether because it doesn't make sense, well, how do you then take from all this? Would you just take the idea of centering the world around yourself and unique experiences? So how does this go about? This is a very interesting project that some universities might be looking into, or have been looking into. I'm not really aware of that. I'm not an expert. And so what's the results? How do this relate in different cultures? Maybe I should be asking one of these experts on Kierkegaard that I know, one of or two, I can write an email to and see what they give of answer. That could be very good as well. Well, that was it. It was the caricature of him in the newspapers and in 1845, and it was about that book with the very, very strange title, Unfinished, or Finishing Unscientific After Writing to the Small Philosophy, a mimic, pathetic, dialectic, co-writing, existential saying by Johannes Clematus, published by S. Kierkegaard.